Grace, I love the way that you talk about longevity, both the simplicity but the depth that you go into. I'd love to just know, what are your 5 tips to living a long health span?
Yeah, whenever I think about longevity and a long health span, I think of the blue zone communities, which are 7 areas around the world who the populations have lived for the longest length of time with really good quality health. So places like Sardinia in Italy, Okinawa in Japan. And from these communities, they've drawn out 9 similar characteristics that all of these communities share. And some of them, I think, sit under certain pillars. So when I categorize these and look at 5 key pillars, I'll name the 5 pillars, then I'll go into them in a bit of detail. So I think diet obviously is very important, and I'll always say that because I'm a nutritionist and I think it's key for health and prevention of disease and longevity. So diet, I think sleep is key, movement, and I say movement intentionally as opposed to exercise, so movement, mindset, and then also connection, so community. So if we look at the first pillar, diet, it's so key, and we see this all over the world in terms of populations who have lived for a long time in good quality health, that people have a unrefined whole foods diet, and to a degree, whether that's keto, paleo, vegan, whatever people are eating, it has to be whole food, and it has to be local, and it has to be really, really nutrient dense, which often looks like taking the extra effort to source good food, good quality food, looking at the soil quality, looking at the microbiome within the soil, to make sure that what we're putting in is really nutrient dense, and we're maximizing on every single bite that we take. We can go into lots of details, but as an overarching principle, we need to be eating whole, real food, which we see mirrored in these people who live for a really long time. So that's really, really key, and then you can get individualized depending on who the person is and what's going on for them, but whole food that's going to stabilize your blood sugar levels, that's based off food that you could grow, that you can identify the food, nothing processed, nothing refined. So that's diet side of things. Then when we look at sleep, it's really clear in the research that good quality sleep and the right amount of sleep is key to longevity. So about 7 to 9 hours is what we're aiming for. For some people, 7 is fine for them, other people need 9, other people 8. It again depends on who the person is, but it's pretty clear in the research that having a good quality sleep, so getting into a deep state of sleep, allows our whole system to restore, particularly from a brain perspective and from a metabolism perspective. Lots of different processes are activated when we sleep and get into that deep state of sleep. And I think clinically I see a lot of people who don't sleep well. Either their mind's too busy and they're not falling asleep, or they're waking up continuously throughout the night, and it leaves them exhausted, and they don't get that whole metabolic clear out that we know goes on in the whole system, particularly in the brain. There's a lot of metabolic waste is produced in the brain. When we sleep, that's your system's chance to clean that all out. So sleep is really key, and there's so many things from a lifestyle perspective that we can do to support a healthy, good quality sleep. Number 3 is around movement. So like I said, not necessarily exercise. I think we need to change how we think about that and think about intentional movement as opposed to incidental movement. So incidental is just what we do in our activities, walking to the bathroom, walking to the shop, to the car, moving around, carrying things. When we think about intentional movement, it's really looking at functional, intentional movement to move different areas of your body, activate different muscles, and I like to think of it as movement as opposed to exercise. I think that has the wrong sort of connotations go along with it sometimes, and movement should be really fun and sustainable and enjoyable. And it's important for most people to have about at least 30 minutes of movement every day, whether that's walking, swimming, or if you're someone who does enjoy the gym, or if you're someone who likes to play a sport like netball or squash. I think everyone needs to incorporate movement into their lifestyle in one shape or form, and alongside that do a lot of incidental movement. So we should live in a way that movement is intertwined into our daily activities. So that's really key for longevity, for the preservation of muscle mass, for looking after your bones, particularly as you age. It's really important that we move, look after our muscles, which therefore looks after our bones and prevents things like osteoporosis and obviously falls. Also for your cardiovascular system, movement, getting your heart rate up is really, really key for our cardiovascular health. And we know that that's one of the biggest drivers of disease is cardiovascular disease. So movement has a really key part to play there. So we've got diet, sleep, movement, mindset. I think it goes without saying that a healthy mind has massive implications into your health in every area. We know that how you use your mind, both positively or negatively, can change your physiology. And again, we see this really clearly in the research. So utilising special tools, whether that's meditation or gratitude, mindfulness, to make sure that we're using our mindset in the right way and just our thoughts in the right way, that we're conscious of how we're thinking, to again use them in the right way to change our physiology. And that can relate to your sleep, or to telling yourself the right things about movement, around your whole system. You know, we see people that have simply healed themselves from certain diseases just by changing their mindset. So I think that has to be a key pillar in longevity. Then lastly, number 5, connection. I think it's so key that we have connection with people, with the planet, with God or the universe. I think it's really key that people have connection and have a village around them. I know they say it takes a child takes a village to grow a child. I think it should be it takes a village to grow a human. That for every single stage of our life we need that network of people around us to care for us, to look out for us, and vice versa, that we are also connected to others and looking out for others. I think that's so vital to our health from a slightly indirect way, but I think that has massive implications, and again we see in the research that it's really key for our health. So those would be the 5 things.
As I was listening to you, I was just thinking, you know, it's just so simple, but we just don't do it. So what do you think prevents us?
I think it's just being uninformed, that we don't know what we don't know. So I think people probably have some ideas of some of these things. They have a bit of an idea that I should get a good sleep, but I find clinically when I'm working with people are often quite unaware of how to get a good sleep, or how to use their mind in the right way, or what are some really simple and practical tools to help you get moving, or to eat in the right way for them, individualized to them. So I think education is huge, to inform people, to give them easy, practical, sustainable tools to implement into their life.
So what are some of those sustainable, preventable tools? I mean, I like what you said there about how we don't know what we don't know, and I think we've got this incredible biology that we walk in every day, but there's just so much that we don't know about this system.
Yeah, I mean, even like from a diet perspective, I think people are really unaware of how important nutrients are just to fuel the body. Sometimes I use the example of producing serotonin in the body. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter within the brain that's a sort of termed the happy hormone, and is really important for a healthy mood. Couple of things. Firstly, people are really unaware that it's produced in the gut. 90% of it is produced in the gut. And secondly, we need 15 different nutrients to be able to produce serotonin. People are often unaware just of the importance of nutrients. They think food is fuel and energy, but they don't break it down to the macronutrient complexity of food, and how literally every single metabolic pathway in our body is fueled by certain nutrients. We can then go the next level and look at polyphenols and phytonutrients and antioxidants that also have really key parts to play, and that's all going back to looking at the quality of the food that we're eating, and where that food comes from, the quality of the soil, and looking at that whole translation of how then it translates to health or ill health.
So true what you said there about how our actions translate to health or ill health, and I'm just thinking about my stage in life at the moment, and hormones, and what I just didn't know anything about until, a year ago now, as I've started transitioning into that phase of my life.
But as you age and get to perimenopause, then menopause, then postmenopause, we see clinically a lot of women struggle during this time, whether that's to do with weight gain, hot flushes, mood swings, can affect their sleep, so it can affect a number of different areas of their life. I often look back at what's going on internally and think, how could we prevent this, which is very preventable for someone. We can prevent a lot of those symptoms that tend to arise. When I look at the gut, there's there's an area of the microbiome called the estroblome, and it's certain bacteria within the gut that actually control how our estrogen presents within the system. So we know estrogen, at again all stages of life, has a different effect on our period, menstruation, on our libido, on symptoms that might arise during menopause. It depends on the bacteria within that sort of group of bacteria called the estroblome, of how your estrogen is processed within the system. So if that's not a healthy set of microbiome or bugs within the gut, then you won't metabolize and detoxify estrogen properly, and you're a lot more likely to get some of these symptoms of weight gain, the hot flushes, the irritability, the mood swings. Whereas if years before you were really prioritizing your gut health, your microbiome, putting the right foods in, stabilizing your blood sugar levels, you're working to cultivate a healthy microbiome, a healthy estroblome, so those group of bacteria that control your estrogen within your system, and therefore working to prevent some of those horrendous symptoms that can happen over that menopause time. A couple of things that go on internally that I think women could be really aware of. So firstly, women often note a lack of cognition or a brain fog that can come over them during those menopausal years. This is often because as our hormone progesterone begins to drop in the system, it changes how our brain functions. So progesterone is really amazing for soothing the brain. It has an anti-inflammatory effect in the brain, and it just really gives a really calming, soothing effect. So that begins to drop over menopause, which is a normal process. However, often women go into menopause and their progesterone's already low, so they're already sort of not functioning in an optimal state. I mean, there's a few things to firstly address that from a lifestyle perspective. So we know that stress is one of the major drivers of progesterone being too low in the system. So addressing that from a dietary perspective, a lifestyle perspective, a sleep perspective, a movement perspective is really helpful to nourish your nervous system and to minimize the effects of stress on your body, which prevents that progesterone drop early on. Secondly, when that progesterone drop does start to happen, which is normal, we know that there's a few key things that we can add into the system to sort of replace progesterone and to really ease those symptoms. So one of them is an amino acid called taurine. So amino acids make up proteins, and there's 21 different amino acids. This one in particular, taurine, we see in the research sort of mimics progesterone in the brain, so it can work to also have that calming, soothing effect on the brain. And often women will comment that it's sort of that fog goes, that brain fog goes, and they can think a lot more clearly. They don't have sort of the memory loss to a degree that some women describe. So taurine can be a really key amino acid to supplement during that time. Magnesium glycinate in particular can as well. So I think everyone's pretty aware of magnesium and the calming effect that it has on the brain. When we pair it with glycine, so another amino acid like taurine, magnesium glycinate, those two together, glycine also has a really calming effect on the brain. So again, it can work to mitigate some of those symptoms that women would typically have. Another thing that I think about when it comes to menopause is looking at how insulin resistant or insulin sensitive your brain is. So as women are moving through those years of perimenopause, their brain becomes more insulin resistant. So it means that they can't utilize glucose in their brain as readily. So this is why when women move into a ketogenic diet and flood their brain with ketones, their brain loves it, because their brain can easily use those ketones in the absence of insulin, or the absence of their brain being able to use insulin really easily. So when we look at a combination of things, minimizing stress, using taurine, using magnesium, going into ketosis. I mean, there's other things in regards to getting out alcohol, looking at caffeine, maximizing sleep, and again, it's looking at that whole holistic picture, pulling on all of those 5 different pillars of optimal health, and pulling on the research, clinical experience, but it actually can make for a much easier process through menopause. And these are just examples I've given for menopause. But we know at every different stage of life, there's so many things that we can practically do from a lifestyle perspective to ease the burden of any sort of disease on the system and just put our bodies into the right environment to function well.